Hey guys, it's Chris and welcome back to another Game of Thrones Season 8 video, and this is going to be my Episode 2 review, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. Alright, so let's jump right in, and immediately we go to Winterfell, where Jaime is essentially on trial here. It doesn't look to be a formal trial, but Dany is kind of holding court here. He did actually kill her father, so Dany didn't get the full story from Jaime as Brienne has heard it before, but she does know generally that her father was crazy and insane, and she has said that many times. So as we expected, Tyrion actually steps up and defends Jaime, and that pisses Dany off a little bit as well. But then of course, as we expected, Brienne also steps up and says, I would serve with him, I would fight beside him, I trust him, he is an honorable man. So while I didn't like Dany's snarky attitude, I do understand it's still a crime. He still killed her father, so I can understand. But there were other moments throughout this episode where she was kind of refocused on the Iron Throne again, as far as being there after this war. But at least this episode, everyone fucking started communicating. And the interesting part here about this informal trial is Bran did say, as I predicted, the things we do for love, and did not tell anybody what Jaime did. So it was kind of really cool to see all this come full circle. And as a matter of fact, right after this, we have a conversation with Bran and Jaime at the Godswood, and he does apologize for what he did, and Bran's not even mad about it. Of course, he's not really Bran Stark anymore, as he tells Jaime. I don't think Jaime quite understands. I don't think anybody quite understands Bran. But it's really cool to see this come full circle and him actually apologize, and Bran understanding everybody was doing their own thing for their own house. And of course, that's the point. They all have to worry about what's going on with the living versus the dead, as opposed to their own damn last names. Now, what I didn't like right after this was Dany was mad at Tyrion again for defending his brother. She's got to understand, just like it was her father who was evil, this is his brother, and all that he's done some horrible things. Nobody knows his complete redemption like Brienne does. She keeps blaming Tyrion for everything, and again, he has made some mistakes, but it's almost like she gets refocused on the Iron Throne for a minute, and then all of a sudden she's back worrying about Jon and the war against the army of the dead. So which is it? Can we talk about these titles and shit later? The main event is coming up in episode 3. Then we have Arya creeping up on Gendry here. She is definitely crushing on Gendry, and she shows off her skills to impress him a bit, and throws dragonglass daggers as she talks about death, and almost hits a dude in the fucking head. Scares the shit out of some old man back there. He probably shit his pants, but she did throw 3 daggers in the same spot, showing all these skills she had to learn from the Faceless Men. So we'll definitely see a big part from Arya in episode 3 as far as her real fighting skill against the army of the dead. But again, this is going to be a face of death she has not seen. And then we had the Bran Jaime scene in the Godswood I just mentioned, and I want to mention one little thing about it. It was really interesting when Jaime asked, what about afterwards? And Bran says to Jaime, how do you know there's going to be an afterwards? Episode 3 is going to be intense, to say the least, and I don't think we're ready for it. Then we have a Jaime Tyrion conversation in the yard, and I really enjoyed this, them kind of catching up a little bit. Now here's the interesting thing here about this big meeting between Tyrion and Cersei. Tyrion essentially told us what was said in that meeting. He said, Cersei told me the pregnancy had changed her. So to me, that tells me exactly what was said in that meeting, and he actually believed it because she did have something to live for as far as this new child. But of course, she lied through her teeth anyway, and Jaime tells everybody, of course, at the meeting prior that she had no intention of ever coming up there. So they all know the truth now, and I think that kind of clears Tyrion for any secret dealings in the back room that people speculate about as far as what he said to Cersei. But there were a few interesting lines here from Tyrion, saying things like, we're going to die at Winterfell, and then he said, at least Cersei won't get to murder me. And another one that caught my attention was, maybe once I'm dead, I'll march down to King's Landing and rip her apart. So I don't really know if this was foreshadowing, but this whole thing with the heat on Tyrion starting to bother me a little bit. So we'll see how this plays out in episode 3 and the rest of the season if he survives Winterfell. Really cool scene I enjoyed after this, where Jaime confronts Brienne and decides to fight for her because he says he's not the fighter he once was. I thought this was really cool of him. It's really kind of completing Jaime's arc here. He's really come full circle and now really prepared to fight and give his life, if need be, for the Starks of Winterfell when this whole damn thing started between the Starks and the Lannisters. As the title says, he's truly a knight of the Seven Kingdoms. Really good scene here as Jorah kind of puts Dany in check because her chip on her shoulder is growing a little bit in parts of this episode. Jorah tells Dany to forgive Tyrion, that Tyrion does make mistakes like we all have, but he actually owns them and learns from them. So I thought that was a really good touch here, as opposed to kind of leaving that open-ended. And of course, later on in the battle plan scene, we do see Dany trying to take up for Tyrion and protect him because she says she will need him after the war. Then we have a scene that I really enjoyed and I think needed to damn happen after last episode. Sansa finally has a conversation with Dany, and they realize they have similar past. I mentioned this earlier, that once they realize they have similar past, they've both been through a bunch of shit, especially as women in this world, they would actually start to respect each other, and I think that actually happened here. And on top of that, back to the Tyrion thing, Sansa also vouches for Tyrion as well, saying Tyrion is a good man, he was always kind to me, the same kind of thing she said before, so Tyrion's getting a little backup from these supposed enemies. But of course, at the end of this, there was a little tension when Sansa says, what about after the war? What about the North after that? So this makes me think, really, that Dany is going to finally start thinking about this whole ruling thing, and probably allow the North to be a separate kingdom. And I really think this is going to set up Sansa being the ruler at some point, because Jon and Dany probably just won't do it. But I really did enjoy this conversation. I think they both conceded a little bit on their attitude and the little chips on their shoulder, but of course they each have their own reason to have that chip on their shoulder, and now that they actually start to communicate a little bit, they'll start to understand each other a little more. And of course, next episode, we will see Dany prove to her she does love Jon and she truly wants to save the Seven Kingdoms. But again, this kind of goes back and forth this episode with Dany thinking about the Iron Throne again, as opposed to the war right in front of her. So that was a little bit all over the place. But it was also really cool that Sansa says, I should have thanked you as soon as you arrived. That was a mistake. So the bottom line here, at least people are now fucking communicating and starting to understand each other. And then of course they get interrupted by Maester Walken and their conversation where Theon has arrived with the rest of the Ironborn. I'm not sure how many men he can have left, maybe 3 or 4. But anyway, apparently they sailed a few ships to White Harbor and came up to Winterfell as well. Really touching scene here where Sansa welcomes Theon back to Winterfell and hugs him. And it's really cool to see these characters come back together where they all regret things they've done to each other in the past. And Theon coming full circle to fight for the Starks since he betrayed them and took Winterfell for himself. And to my point about Dany starting to rethink things, it really does focus on Dany here as she sees that Sansa is the girl that people want to fight for. So I really think it's going to set her up as a ruler at some point at the end of this season. Really cool little scene where Davos feeds some people as they're all scared shitless because they're not soldiers, and he sees a girl that reminds him of Shireen. I thought that was really cool, and Gilly had a little part in this episode as well where she said she's going to be down in the crypts and encourages the girl to come down there and protect them. Obviously that's to keep this little girl safe, but it was really cool that he was reminded of Shireen here. Then we have Ed, Beric, and Tormund showing up, and Jon greeting them as well. This is the last of the Night's Watch and last of the Wildlings, apparently. So a touching little scene here where they all have their little reunion. And of course, Tormund does warn them that they just saw the last hearth fall. Jon asks about the Umbers. He says they're fighting for the Night King now. How long do we have? Before the sun comes up tomorrow. And of course, the first thing Tormund is worried about is the big woman still here. Then we have the big war table where everybody is around trying to plan out the battle since Tormund and them brought the news of the impending attack that's coming very soon. And Bran actually at the table says, the Night King will come for me. Essentially, Bran is going to be the Night King bait here. But he does say in particular he wants to end this world, and I am the memory of this world. And Sam has a really great little monologue here where he says, that's it. That's what death is. It's not remembering or not being remembered. So that's really cool. I do hope there is still an actual separate angle for the Night King and not just wanting to kill everyone and that's his only goal. We have not seen Bran have a vision yet as far as the actual goal or the first long night, etc. But of course we said all along that the Night King does want revenge at the same time, but I do think he has another goal, and I think that's going to be part of the third twist. And then of course right after this meeting, Jon kind of says your grace and walks off from Dany, so Dany knows something is wrong. Tyrion and Bran start a little conversation off screen. I thought this is really great for them to get together so they can understand each other, especially after that weird stare that Bran gave him in episode 1. So I do think whatever that issue was, if there was an issue in the first place, they will have worked that out or whatever. Of course, Bran would remember that Tyrion did help him in Cripples, Bastards, and Broken Things when he designed him a saddle when he was a kid so he could still ride horses. Missandei and Grey Worm have their final conversation. I do believe this is going to be a final conversation, unfortunately, as they talk about after the war's over, they want to go back to Noth, where Missandei is from, and Grey Worm will come protect her. But I don't know if we'll ever see that happen. This next episode is going to fucking rip our hearts out. I'm telling you, winter is really coming. Then we have a shot of Jon, Sam, and Ed on the wall here, the last Watchers on the wall, and if you look right here, you can actually see Ghost in the damn picture. So Ghost is alive and well. They apparently just cut out all the parts or never filmed the reunion with Jon and Ghost. But Ghost is in fact standing behind Jon here like he's been there the entire time. So at least we got to see a shot of him, and I don't really know if we want to see him again, because if we do in the battle, he's probably not going to make it. And by the way, Sam is a badass, and he did steal a number of books from the Citadel. And not to mention he was the first one to kill a White Walker. Then we have a great scene here. This was my absolute favorite scene of the episode, where they're all sitting around the fire drinking, essentially getting drunk because they're going to all die. And Jaime knights Brienne. I called this a long time ago. I do think Brienne will survive this whole thing and be the Lord Commander of the Queen's Guard or King's Guard, whatever it may be, and she will write in the book about Jaime Lannister, the Book of Brothers, and take out the Kingslayer part and put down his actual name, and that he sacrificed himself at some point. Now, I don't know if that will be next episode or in episode 5 or in the finale or whatever, but I do think that's the way it goes down. This actually brought a few tears to my eyes here as Jaime makes her officially a knight, and she arises Sir Brienne of Tarth, Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. We see the Hound sitting up by himself on the battlements, and Arya joins him for a few minutes, as well as Beric. They have a little conversation, and it goes as expected. They're never going to hug it out or anything, like I said before. This is the way they show love to each other, is basically insult each other. That's the way the Hound works, but it shows that he has come full circle as well in his arc, and he is there fighting for something bigger than himself, as Arya actually asks him, when was the last time you ever fought for anything other than yourself? And the Hound responds, I fought for you, didn't I? And then the most shocking scene of the entire episode, Arya and Gendry get it on. Now, this doesn't mean that she will end up being a lady, but it does show that she has emotion again. So as a lot of us wanted, Arya and Gendry actually get it on in the forge, I suppose, or the stables, or wherever in the hell it was. Because why not? They think they are going to die, and I guess that makes sense. If you think you're going to die, you might as well. Then we get a quick little scene I think was needed. Jorah and Lyanna finally talk about the future of their house, and he's trying to tell her to not fight because he wants to protect their house, saying she is the future of the house, and she of course is her snarky little self and says, I will not sit in somewhere and let people fight for me. I'm going to fight. And of course he respects those wishes, but at least they had that conversation, because we were wondering in the episode 1 why Jorah and Lyanna Mormont never had a conversation. But she does turn around and say, I wish you good fortune in the war, cousin. So at least they acknowledge each other to kind of get that out of the way. And they just didn't leave that kind of out in the air as far as an unanswered question about do they even know each other. And then we go back to the scene where they're getting drunk around the fireplace, and Tyrion says, how about a song? And at this point they're all pretty much drunk and wasted, and why not? They're about to die anyway. But Pod actually sings a song called Jenny's Song, and this is a little shout out to the books here, and this is a song about Jenny of Oldstones. Now in the books there is a character called the Ghost of High Heart, who gives information to the Brotherhood Without Banners, and for that information she always requests that they sing this song called Jenny's Song, and it's about Jenny of Oldstones. Now Jenny of Oldstones was a character from the books who married Duncan Targaryen, the Prince of Dragonflies, and Duncan loved Jenny so much he cast aside his crown. Now does that sound like something that could happen very soon? And her best friend was apparently this Ghost of High Heart, who some believe to be an actual child of the forest because of her stature and the way she's described. And in the books, she does have dreams or visions from the old gods, she says. Now what ties this into our story is that the Ghost of High Heart is the one who came in and predicted that the prince that was promised would be born of the line of Aerys and Rhaella Targaryen, of course likely being Jon Snow or Daenerys Targaryen. So a really cool little shout out to the books as well. They did mention her really quickly, the Maesters did back in season 7. So really cool to see the song being sung, and they had a little montage of people getting ready as well while he finished singing it. I thought this was really well done to hear this song while you see everybody talking, eating, almost a Last Supper vibe as they get ready for the army of the dead. And finally we see Jon in the crypts of Winterfell, and we were correct when we had our little trailer breakdown. He was standing in front of his mother this time, Lyanna Stark. Dany actually joins him in the crypts, essentially like we called it in our prediction videos, where Jon has been kind of standoffish to Dany. She's wondering what's wrong with him, and he actually tells her straight up the entire story about Rhaegar and Lyanna. So apparently he got all the details off screen from Sam or Bran or both. And of course immediately Dany is taken aback, because this means that Jon is technically the heir to the Iron Throne. But again, I don't think he'll give a shit about titles. He's already said that many times throughout the first 2 episodes. So her first thought was not about him or their relationship. It was about the Iron Throne again. But of course, as we suspected, they were interrupted by 3 blows of the horn, which means the Night King and the White Walkers have arrived, and they all have to rush to get into position. The battle is about to begin. So I do think episode 3 will open up with the war, and it will last the entire damn episode. It's going to be super intense and probably break our hearts. Overall, I thought this was probably the best episode so far of Season 8. Obviously, there's only been 2, so it's a 50-50 shot. But overall, it was a really good episode. People started communicating again. We had a lot of great conversations between characters that we needed to see happen, as opposed to kind of leaving plot holes all over the place. We had those reunions we needed, and generally people said what they needed to say before this war starts. So now that they at least have some basic understanding of each other, they can focus on the Night King and then worry about what happens as far as who rules what after all this is over, assuming they all survive. Anyway guys, let me know what you think in the comments below. Did you love it, hate it? What was the good, bad, and ugly of Game of Thrones Season 8, Episode 2? And as usual, thank you for all the support, especially to you guys on Patreon. And a huge shout out to my executive Patreon SmokeScreen producers. If you dig what I do here, please give these videos a like, comment, and a share. And be sure to subscribe to get everything and click that notification bell so you're notified when I drop a new video. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.